Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by the HLA in partnership with NetHope. My name is Carmen Parkinson, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session, Collective Action on Localized Humanitarian AI, Unlocking Solutions Together. It's great to see people already joining the room and introducing themselves in the chat. We're absolutely delighted to have over 450 people registered from over 90 different countries. So we're really excited at the global interest in today's conversation. Today's session is set to last for 90 minutes, beginning with this welcome and introductions, followed by some housekeeping. Then we'll hear from you through a short audience poll. Then we'll move into a series of short presentations from our wonderful speakers. Then in the second half of the session, we'll move into audience Q&A. So that's where you'll be able to put your questions to the panel. So if you have any questions, please submit those through the Zoom Q&A function. So that's in your toolbar, you'll see a question mark icon. Please submit any questions at any time, and we'll pick those up in the second half of the session. So it's great to see people introducing themselves. Hello, Vijay from India, Mohammed Umair from Pakistan, Eileen from Berlin, Martha from Uganda, welcome. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a stellar group of speakers today. So a huge thank you and welcome to Deogratius Kiggudde, Meheret Takele Mandafro, Tino Kreutzer, and Esther Grida. I'd now like to invite each speaker to say hello and briefly introduce themselves and tell us why they're interested in today's conversation on localized AI. So let's come to you first, please, Deo.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. My name is Deogratius Kiggudde, and I manage programs at the Upanzi network. We are a Pan-African research network hosted at Carnegie Mellon University here in Kigali, where we build, test, and independently really assess digital public goods and infrastructure and the AI that actually goes through them. So why I'm actually interested in this conversation is because I spent over a decade in the humanitarian world, especially in the mapping sector, really looking at how people moved from depending on commercial maps at the time that were very scarce in some of the communities that we're working in, to really working with open source community-run default maps that open like OpenStreetMap, because local people were actually funded and built their own and really managed their own, resources on that. And I think for localized AI, this is the same problem, and I would really want us to see how we can solve that even faster this time. So yeah, really excited for that. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Deo. It's so fantastic to have you here today. Meheret, would you like to introduce yourself?
Definitely. Thank you, Carmen. Hi, everyone. I'm Meheret Takele, and I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm from NetHope. I'm a digital transformation analyst leading our NetHope connected community. I work closely with local and national nonprofits across Africa, Asia, and beyond. And I'm here today because their experience with AI is exactly what I believe this conversation needs. And these organizations are already doing a very remarkable work on localized AI, but often in isolation. And that is precisely why I believe collective action matters, and it's how we make sure no one has to build the same solutions twice. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Meheret. Over to you, please, Tino.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're truly delighted to be here, not just me, there's other people here from Kobo. I think for us, it's an honor to be talking here because for Kobo, we're a nonprofit really dedicated to having better data that's collected all around the world. And for us, localization is always a bit of a funny word because the vast majority of organizations who use our tools, which is open source data collection, that really is the standard for humanitarian actors, called Kobo Toolbox. Those organizations are local, and to them, this is the tool they use. They speak to local organizations in their own languages. So localization is the default for us and for our users, and this is where we start from. So AI for us has to conform to that. It's not sort of an afterthought, but it doesn't work unless it's local to begin with. So happy to to engage with everyone here today. I'm really excited to talk about this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tino. Kobo really is doing some incredible work in this space. So thank you for being here and sharing your experiences. So over to you, Esther.
Thanks, Carmen. So I'm Esther Guida. I work for NetHope as the Director of Membership Engagement. And NetHope has a membership of around 60 INGOs. We also have a second community, which Meheret mentioned, which I work closely with her on, which is a community of smaller, more local organisations, and that's a growing community. And I think what's really exciting for us at NetHope at the moment is that through that community, we've started giving grants for AI work and for AI projects. And so we're learning so much from that community at the moment. And so it's really great to be here to sort of be able to share with others what we're learning and also hear what other people are learning through their own experiences as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Esther. And thank you to all of you truly for taking the time to be here with us today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carmen Parkinson from the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and I'm based near Manchester in the UK. The HLA is part of Save the Children UK, and our mission is to accelerate the movement for locally led humanitarian action. And we really do see AI and technological developments very much as part of this conversation. And that's the lens through which we're looking at this today. So thank you once again. And thank you to everyone introducing themselves in the chat. It really is so lovely to welcome you here. So this session is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the HLA YouTube channel, and the email will be sent to you with the slide deck early next week. Zoom captions are enabled, so you can turn those on by going to your Zoom toolbar and pressing CC, and translated captions are available as well. We want this to be a lively and interactive discussion space, so you're very welcome and encouraged to use the chat to share any reflections or comments as we go along. If you have any questions for the panelists in the second half of this session, please submit those using the Q&A function. So that's the little sort of question mark icon that you'll see in the toolbar. As a kind reminder to keep any questions or comments that you have respectful and on topic, so relevant to localized AI in humanitarian work. And then finally, in recognition of your learning and engagement in this forum today, you'll be able to claim an HPass digital badge. So keep your eye out for a separate email for details of how to claim that next week. So we'd now like to hear a little bit from you, our audience members. So we've just got a couple of questions to ask you, and I'm going to load that up, and Esther's going to walk you through that.
Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, so we would love to hear from everybody. What brings you here today? So we've got a few options which you can hopefully see there on your screen. Exploring localized AI for your own organization, curious about the technology, you have specific questions to ask, you want to connect to others or share ideas in the chat, general interest, just here to listen, and then other, which is obviously the most exciting option, actually, because we really want to hear what other reasons people might have joined for. So please do type in the chat if you've chosen other, and we'll be able to hear from you.
Fantastic. We'll just give that a second. I can see that over 70 people have responded, and it's going up rapidly. That's great to see people engaging. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll now.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the results up there on your screen. So it looks like actually the largest contingent are here because they're exploring localized AI for their own organizations, which is really interesting, because that does mean that potentially there's a lot of organizations here with things that they can also share by this forum in future. Then we have a lot of people coming because they're curious about the technology, some to connect with others, and others for general interest. So please do type in the chat there if you have another reason for joining as well, and we'll be interested to hear. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. That's really interesting that people are really keen to dive into the technology a little bit. So we just got a second question that we'll launch now.
So, second question, what is the main challenge that you currently face with using AI in your context? So we've put a few options there to get you started. So it might be kind of costs, for example, licenses and maintenance, lack of suitable tools available to you, AI expertise, for example, skills, particularly technical skills and AI literacy, data concerns around security and privacy, infrastructure such as power and connectivity, language access, leadership factors, thinking about how you can get buy-in from the right people in your organization, or time and capacity to focus on AI. And again, we do have the other option as well, in case you have something else to add.
That's fantastic. We'll just give that a second. I can see over 70 people have responded, and that's going up as well. So thank you. Now going to close the poll.
Great. So seeing the results coming in, it looks like the highest contingent have voted for AI expertise. So that's kind of AI literacy, digital skills, technical skills. That's the biggest barrier that people are seeing. Close second there, or close second and third are data concerns, and then costs, for example, licenses and maintenance. And then we also have a few people that have voted for lack of suitable tools, or issues with infrastructure, and some that have voted for leadership. And actually language is a very low number of votes in this particular poll, which is interesting.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting to see. What surprised me is data concerns ranking so highly. So thank you very much for sharing that. So we continue. So I'm just going to spend the next few minutes contextualizing today's discussion in the HLA's work before I hand over to Esther, who will do the same from NetHope's side. So why are we talking about AI in the humanitarian context through a localized lens when AI is a global phenomenon, some people may wonder. So for those of you who've been engaging in our work over the past year, the HLA, together with our partner, Data Friendly Space, has been tracking how humanitarians are navigating AI adoption decisions. So that's been conducted through 2 surveys with over 4,200 responses from over 140 different countries. And on top of that, we've been continuing the dialogue through convenings like these webinars with NetHope, at HMPW, and other settings where we've been really getting that continuous feedback through the community. And through that, we're hearing the concerns from the sector, as well as things that people are excited about. So we see that humanitarian AI is being very much driven by individual uptake of commercial tools, and that's due to accessibility. Lots of people are using free versions of tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, DeepSeek, and so on. What's interesting and notable is that AI adoption, because it's individually driven by humanitarians, is not following what you might see as a typical global north to south diffusion pattern. Because it's driven by individual usage, it's actually clustered and concentrated and aligns with operational need. So, for example, at country level, we're seeing that the most intensive use was in Kenya, Sudan, and Bangladesh. And as I said, in these convenings and discussions, we sort of keep note of what's coming up. And these are some of the key themes that emerge time and again in the conversations. And, if anything resonates with you there, you can put something in the chat, or if you've got a different perspective, again, feel free to share your thoughts with us. We're really interested to hear. And you'll see that a lot of these themes cluster around this notion of localized, contextualized humanitarian AI solutions that are driven by local need and grounded in local context. So we conducted a series of interviews with humanitarian practitioners and members of our community. I think Noor is on the call with us today. So hello, Noor. And she works in community engagement, and she's very much an advocate for building together with communities and not thinking by that default of starting with large solutions. Ivan from Uganda, he has particular interest in climate resilience, and he has very bold ambitions and visions for AI use cases in humanitarian work, including, in the area of climate resilience, also MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support. So he's very optimistic. However, he is very much telling us about the context that he works, Rhino refugee camp, connectivity challenges, so different languages being used. So we really want advocates for donors really working in partnership with humanitarians to understand those local needs. And then finally, Sudarshan, who I think is joining the call today as well. He works for a technology firm in Kathmandu, Nepal. And he's working on this platform that's in anticipatory action. And it's a very interesting case study because this platform is being scaled across Nepal. So it's very ambitious. And also in contexts like Bangladesh and Malawi. But even though it's scaling, he really advocates for contextualization and localization, really that the solutions have to integrate with local platforms, systems, and people. So those three quotes have just been, I've just chose those to sort of put a bit of a human face on those data points and those themes that have emerged through our research and convening over the past year. And that's why, based on that evidence, qualitative and quantitative, this points the HLA and our work and engagement with the community into this space of localized AI. And we're absolutely delighted to have this session today together with NetHope so that we can pull together our collective thoughts and ideas and networks in this space. So I'd now like to pass over to Esther, who will say more from the NetHope perspective. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you. So if you just go to the next slide. I just wanted to briefly touch on the always thorny issue of terminology, because as we know, terminology around localization is already just extremely complicated and a bit of a minefield. But it only gets more complicated when you also are talking about technology and AI. So I just wanted to make a little bit of a distinction here about what we're going to be talking about in the webinar. So we're talking about localized AI in terms of AI, which is really designed to meet the needs of communities, whether that be in terms of accessibility needs or communities having been involved in designing AI tools. So we're talking in that very broad sense of AI that has involved communities in its design and is also kind of owned and governed by communities. What we're not specifically talking about is local AI or local LLMs in terms of models that are hosted on one machine or device. We probably will mention that at some point. It might come up in our discussions, but that's just not the main focus of the discussion. So I just wanted to make that distinction before we start in case there's any confusion. And then on to the next slide. Now, this slide, hopefully it's showing properly on your screen, but it's harking back to a webinar that we had in January. So some of you may have been at that webinar as well. So Carman and I hosted that along with some other speakers. And what we did was we talked a little bit about some of our kind of predictions for 2026. in terms of AI. And because we're halfway through 2026, I thought it would be nice to put that slide up again. And the ones that are highlighted in blue, I guess, are the ones that we're going to touch on today. So we'll be thinking about, kind of what progress has been made on those topics. So more localized AI use cases and tools developed in the Global South, smaller, more agile organizations demonstrating what can be achieved when they're unencumbered by red tape. And then potentially kind of linked to that as well, discussion about environmental impacts. It's linked in a way to the idea of having more kind of local tools or really prioritizing tools that have a really positive impact for society over other tools. So environmental impacts also links a little bit to the discussions around kind of moves away from dependence on US tools, discussions about open source and things like that. And of course, it does touch as well on the kind of beyond the hype theme as well, because the organizations in this webinar are all thinking about very specifically what can they design to meet the needs of the communities that they're working with and solve actual real world problems. So I just wanted to bring us back to that discussion that we'd had in January to touch on that. And then just on this slide, just to briefly mention as well, I guess, some of the kind of signals, I call them, that we've seen over the past few months that relate to some of those themes as well. And so within NetHope, we're constantly sharing all kinds of articles and exciting developments that we see coming up. So the first one here, I believe Meheret flagged this up to our team. It was a new model, multi-language speech-to-text model, which is for Ethiopian languages. Now, there are many, many Ethiopian languages. This model is available for 5 languages currently, and it really kind of opens up new possibilities in terms of the tools and things that can be developed for Ethiopian contexts and solve Ethiopian problems. So that's one development, one small development that we've seen over the past few months that has really big implications. In terms of the environment, I mean, you've also seen them, but there's been so many reports coming out to do with AI and the environment, which all kind of tell us that we really need to kind of prioritize the use of AI where it's actually going to have the most impact. And so I've just put some really quite scary statistics there from one of the recent reports that came out about AI's overall environmental impact. Yeah, quite frightening, those statistics. And then lastly, I put something there which is to do with some of the discussions about how open source AI is gaining traction. I've put an open source AI gap map, which we spotted, which is quite interesting, pulling together a whole range of different open source AI tools. And also an article about human rights defenders and how they're using AI tools. They're often the ones that most struggle with using kind of big tech and are often looking for alternatives. So I thought I would just pull out those in terms of the kind of big picture to illustrate some of the trends that we're seeing over the past 6 months.
Thank you, Esther. That's really interesting to see. It was also interesting to revisit those predictions that you shared back in January and how some of those have how things have been. Oh, sorry, you've got this other slide as well. I do apologise. Over to you again.
And this is just also going back to January. This was a quote from Tom Fletcher, which we looked at in January. And I think this really gets to the heart of what people are talking about today, is how can we really make sure that we're kind of prioritising using the AI tools that are available to us to solve some of the most important social problems and for the benefit of humanity. So I just wanted to share that quote again, because I think it is inspiring and sets the scene for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Esther. Yes, exactly. The very grounding words. So now that we've set the scene from the HLA and NetHope's perspective, or institutional perspective, we're now going to dive deeper with the expert expert perspectives, Meheret, Deo and Tino. So we'll have a series of short presentations, starting with Meheret. So over to you, Meheret.
Thank you so much, Carmen, and thank you, Esther. As we have already done the introduction, I'm going to jump that and just jump to my presentation. So it's great that you have already set out what we mean when we say localized AI. And what I'm going to do is I want to take that one step further and ask the question of what does localization means for the international nonprofit organizations. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So what I have done is I analyzed the localization narratives in the strategy documents around 40 international nonprofit organizations. And that's because these documents are where we say who we are and what we are committing for the next 5 to 10 years. And the first thing to say is that localization is not one or a single idea. It has, like, based on the analysis that I have done, it has 6 distinct framings that came out from that analysis, and I'm going to share that with you today. So the first one is localization as empowerment, which means shifting power to the people most affected. And second is localization as system strengthening, which refers to investing into local institutions. And the third one is localization as a collaboration across sectors, which also relates to like building digital hubs connecting across sectors. And fourth, localization as innovation, which means building platforms to scale solutions built on local ingenuity. And the fifth one, localization as accountability. It relates to centering communities so that the work is legitimate. And the last narrative from that analysis is localization as normative commitment, which refers to localization as a sector-wide standard to adopt. So looking across these different 6 narratives, we can see that these are not just soft statements. This is a serious, well-developed commitment. And the thing that really interested me most in this work is that, as you can see from the examples of each framing, digital is not sitting outside of these framings. It's already inside every one of them. And in these strategies, they rarely name AI specifically, and it is, I believe that it's entirely reasonable for a 10-year, 5 to 10-year document. But we can see that AI is the newest layer of that same digital commitment, which means the guidance is already there. The question is not whether we believe in localization, it is how deep localization AI actually goes. Next slide, please. So I'm going to put some layers of localized AI, and each one asks a deeper question than the one before. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is language, which is a question that asks, does the AI work in the language people actually speak? Not just the interface, but the training, the support, the documentation, the help desk. So does that kind of language availability do we have? The second is access. It's related to asking the questions, does it run where people actually are on the channel they already use with the connectivity they actually have? And the third layer is data. It's related to asking whose reality is encoded in the system we are developing, who decide what counts as a case, as a risk, or as a harm. And when we see the fourth one, it's related to governance, and it's asking the question, who sets the rules, whose ethics, whose safeguards are written and written by whom. And the last one, the last layer is related to ownership, and ownership relates to who decide and who still holds the initiatives that we are building, the AI tools, after we develop them. So what I want to mention is most of the conversations about localized AI focus at layer 1, and the layers, as you can see, the layer 1 and 2 definitely matter enormously, but they are related to adaptations. But when we see layers 3, 4, and 5, it's related to where ownership genuinely shifts. So that is the difference between translating an interface and localizing of an AI tool. And something at the end of these layers, what I want to mention is that it's also a question any funder or any international organization can ask: which layer are we actually funding, or which layer are we actually implementing? Are we implementing the language layer, the access, the data, or in which layer are we investing or implementing? So we can identify through these layers. Next slide, please. So to see what local organizations are actually doing, I went and looked through some of the local nonprofit organizations. So what I focused on a recent NetHope AI grant that Esther already mentioned, that supported 6 connectors, which are local organizations that are part of our NetHope Connected community. And as we can see from this table, 3 are using AI to deliver their mission, and 3 of them are building AI readiness and governance into their organization. So generally what this table shows is the organizations and what type of AI project they are conducting. So just to go through them, the first one in Tanzania, Digital Agenda for Tanzania, they are promoting the ethical use of AI in journalism and civic media. In Egypt, Educality are strengthening small civil or society organizations to adopt AI responsibly through an ethical AI readiness lab. And the other one is in Uganda, Rural Smile Foundation are piloting an AI threat monitoring tool for reporting and intimidation of human rights violations. And the other one in Somalia, Safe Somali Women and Children are embedding responsible AI into their protection work for women and children. And the other one, the fifth, is in Italy, Shield APS are building a practitioner-powered harm intelligence system for online safety. And the last one is in Nigeria, Women's and Girls Empowerment Network are running an AI-powered safe voice platform, which supports women and girls to report gender-based violence and access to justice. So after this, what I'm going to do is we are going to see what happens when we hold these 6 projects against the 5 layers that we already described. Next slide, please, come on. So here you have to remember the 5 layers in our previous slides, and these are some of the examples where the AI projects that I already described align with the different layers. So just to mention one example for each, but you can see the other projects also relate to in which layers. So to start with regard to language layer, in Tanzania, journalists and civic media groups are building verification and localization workflows in Swahili. And like you can see the others in Egypt, in Arabic, and others. So this is regard to the language layer. And related to access, which is the second layer, a women organization in Nigeria that runs a reporting platform for survivors of gender-based violence. And what's it's really interesting and what it's related to access is what they have built, the tool they built, the AI-supported service can be reached in 4 ways: through an app, through a wave, through WhatsApp, and also a plain SMS. So that is how we can see the access layer in this project. And looking through the third layer, we can take one example, which is related to SHIELD's project, which uses a shared harm dictionary to that harm data of each organization that gathers can be compared across organizations. So this is just to show some example of the data layer. And in relation to governance, there are a lot of examples, but just to mention one, a women organization in Somalia is writing their own AI governance policy and ethical framework. So this is an example of how a layer of governance is being built by this organization. And the last layer is ownership. So related to ownership, we can take one example of the project that I already mentioned, the Safe Voice AI platform that makes sure the survivor is told what happened to her report, so she stays connected to her own information rather than losing it to the system. So that is a kind of ownership that we want to see in localized AI work. So just to wrap it up, these layers, this is to show just how they fit into these layers. But I have to mention that there are certain barriers, which includes language, connectivity, funding, and working in isolation. So, come on, if you go to the next slide. I'm going to conclude my presentation with this, saying that, so what would it take to go deeper? And these are some of the recommendations that I want to lay out. The first one is, I want to recommend 3 moves. The first one is we need a shared offline-ready infrastructure. And the second one is we have to fund AI initiatives beyond their pilot stage through their sustainability. And the third one is creating a space to share and amplify so that collective action can support the barriers that we already mentioned above. So this is some of the recommendations that I want to state, and I want to conclude my presentation with saying that no single organization can build the whole layer alone, and none of them should have to be built twice in isolated with different organizations. And as I already started with talking about localization, localization is the sector stated commitment, which we already proved looking into the strategy documents. And the layer is where we find out how deep we are building localized AI tools. I think that's all. Thank you so much. Over to you, Kaman.
Thank you so much, Meheret. I really, really love the work that you're doing in this space, and I really appreciate the clarity through your narrative framings as well as the layers. I think that's a really good and useful framework for us in this space. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we'll if you have any questions specifically for Meheret, please pop those in the Q&A and we'll pick those up later. And now I'd like to hand over to Tino. Over to you, Tino.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that was an amazing framing to follow on. So I will, I guess, add to this discussion, the presentation, by talking about the implementation side. So Kobo and Kobo Toolbox are really from the ground up built, and our whole organization is dedicated to having organizations rely on better data to measure and inform their programming. So I'll start by just saying a few things for those who may not be too familiar. So Kobo is a nonprofit organization. We're global in scope, and our tools, and primarily Kobo Toolbox, is a data collection tool for primarily humanitarian workers for the humanitarian sector, but also widely used across human rights, development, environmental sectors, and so on. If you can pop to the next slide there, we, if you will, really are from the ground up, and as a tool in the organization, have always come from the sector from the perspective of users. We were researchers, we were UN workers trying to find the right tools to collect better data for our own work. And so Kobo is about 20 years old, but the word Kobo and Kobo Toolbox actually originated in Holy Land in northern Uganda, where our enumerators, during co-design sessions, actually came up with the name for this really early version of what became Kobo Toolbox for this electronic data collection method. And fast forward, I suppose, to a number of years later, and if you can go to this next slide there, please. The tool that we released just over 10 years ago in 2014, so the really first version of our global platform for Kobo Toolbox survey data collection, launched in 2014, and from then onwards, we had many organizations driving this from the bottom up approach that data collection should not be only done by the large UN organizations and large INGOs, but actually it should be done by local organizations primarily. If you look at this graph, which shows the number of survey submissions that we've been receiving from and that we've been hosting on many servers for humanitarian workers and many other sectors, you see that we've actually reached 1.5 billion in this graph, so it's slightly outdated. We reached just recently 1.5 billion surveys collected by over 35,000 organizations in over 200 countries. And what's really important and really special, and we're really proud, our whole team is really dedicated towards, is that our whole background as an organization is dedicated towards keeping this as accessible and as free as possible, which means actually 95% of our users, and we have hundreds of thousands of users at this point, 95% of users use the platform day in, day out for free, and they rely on their whole program and M&E and evaluation framework is all built on the fact that they can rely on this platform as a generally free and extremely accessible platform. And that's, I guess, a point that is really important to keep in mind, because if you think about lots and lots of small organizations that we work with, they don't have large budgets for AI, right? So as we saw early in the survey results during the polls, costs are a major driver. And it's not just the cost you pay today, it's the cost you might be paying tomorrow, because maybe the prices will go up, inevitably they will, right? And if you get the whole organization relying on these tools and the cost doubles over time, that is an extremely unpleasant wake-up call for many organizations that happened even last year with other technologies. So for us, this is one of the major driving forces why we build not just Kobo as a tool for collecting data, but also how we integrate AI. How do we keep it accessible and useful for local teams? Let's go to the next slide. What you see here is some of the AI features that we've already released. So in Kobo, you can build your surveys not just to collect any kinds of survey data, but also to collect what we call qualitative information, open-ended, long-form survey responses, which is where a lot of the depth comes in. So we've built these features to allow users to collect open-ended audio or text, and then that can be transcribed into text. You can use AI for that step. You can use machine translation to translate into other languages, as you can see. And then we recently, just a month or so ago, released features to allow you to use AI to actually code and categorize the long-form responses, as you can see here. We did none of that before going through a really rigorous analysis with both from the literature and with our local partners in co-design sessions to understand what are the ethical risks, and we've published them. There's a link at the bottom here. We've published all of them. We've gone through a lot of checklists and really careful analysis so that everything we build goes to minimize these risks. But these are not just risks that we found in the lab. These are risks that real, local research and initiatives have raised. And then if we couldn't find a good way to de-risk it, to protect against it, we wouldn't release that feature. Everything you see now and everything I will explain in the next slides actually goes towards how do we release something that's responsible and ethical for the whole sector, right? Not just for a couple of organizations. And maybe just before you jump to the next slide, give me 2 more seconds there. What we've done, and you can see that when we jump to the analysis, there's, for example, on every screen, actually, what you see here is the ability for the human to say, I'm not quite okay with this. I'm going to verify this. I'm going to make edits to it. Everything under the hood gets logged to say this may have been created or this was created by AI, but the human in the loop always gets to verify and check it. And if they don't, there's always a record that shows that it was not reviewed and not edited by a human. And that's really important. So the AI drafts, and the humanitarian worker, the humanitarian specialist, decides what to do with that data and whether to make changes. We've also made really rigorous, we've just released that, and I'll share the links at the end. We released a study to show how reliable they are, because there's no point in having AI do all of this if it's not reliable. So we're really happy to say that actually in our testing, we found that the models are more reliable than most human coders, at least for English. And that's the big, at least asterisk for this discussion, because of course we want to try that and test it for many other languages. And we know, all of us know that the quality is not the same for many other languages once you move away from English. So let's talk about some of the technical steps. If we can go to the next slide. Some of the things that we've done under the hood, if you will, beyond the UI choices that you've seen and that I already talked about. So for example, when we use our AI models to do the categorization, to do the coding of qualitative data, we never send and we never will send the data off to another commercial provider. So it does not go to let's say OpenAI or Anthropic servers. Some of these models are extremely good, but what we've seen is that even though you can have very strong terms of service in place, there's never full trust, and we've seen organizations being burned by that. And increasingly, regulators also just don't trust that API handoff to say we trust the terms of service. And for humanitarian workers, that is also a risk that we do not want to pass on, right? So for us, it's really important. If you trust Kobo and you trust Kobo Toolbox to collect the data, then it stays in our own environment, and that extends to using AI models. So we use GPT-OSS 120B at the moment as the best open weights model. Open weights referring to sort of an equivalent of open source for AI, which means we can host it, we can run it on our own servers. We have full control over how that gets handled. And also it means it's more reliable because the model will work the exact same way whenever you use it. When we find a better open weights model, which we're currently evaluating again, we will host that and switch to that instead, but it will remain in Kobo servers. The second option, and that's really relevant for localization as well, as you can see on the right here, is what we do for extending speech recognition or ASR, automatic speech recognition, to more and more languages. We already support about 150 languages for existing models, but what we want is to actually extend it to more languages that are priorities for humanitarian crises. And for that, we currently use Meta's omnilingual 7B model. Again, that's an open weights model, which means we can fine tune, we can add more languages. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about a bit more what we're doing in practice and which language we're focusing on. Great. So it was great to talk about the Ethiopian ASR models at the very beginning of Esther's slide. It was really great because we've been having our eyes on this for a while as well. In fact, we've done some of our co-design workshops in Addis, in Ethiopia, as well as in Colombia. And of course, we've seen this and we've known this, that Ethiopian languages in particular are not great for any of the commercial models. But because of the work that we saw earlier and that Google and others are doing, we are able now to extend these languages and to improve them. So it's not just the ones that you're seeing on the screen here. We can benefit because of the ethos of open source and open sharing through Creative Commons license, for example. We can use these languages and say, well, let's improve the models that we have and increasingly replace commercial models entirely and just host all of that in our own environment. We don't do this in isolation. We're working, as you can see here, with Clear Global, with UNHCR, with George Mason University and other partners, and especially local partners as well, to collect some of this data, to validate some of this data, to process it. It's an arduous process. It's costly. So wherever others are already doing this work and they've released the data, that means we can then use it to train and improve the models for those languages. So there's never a moment where you say, oh, it's not that good. You should always come back and test it again after a few weeks and months because of this work. Great. So I know in the interest of time, I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker, but if there are any questions, I'll be in the Q&A and happy to respond there or later on. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Tino, for that fantastic presentation. It's great to hear some of the technological developments and the things that you're working on in this space, in particularly in relation to languages. Great to see the synergies as well with Meheret's presentation. So thank you. So if you have any questions for Tino, please do pop those in the Q&A and we'll pick those up shortly. So over to you now, Deogratius Kiggudde.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kamak. We've definitely heard from Merit about the layers and Tino about how Kobo is as well. And I think for me that's really it was really good listening to some of the work that they're working on as well. And I can feel a lot of synergies from our side as well. But I wanted to start off with the phrasing that Carmen you opened up with, of where the adoption is not always following the global north south pattern. Already we're seeing a lot of intensity within Kenya, Bangladesh, and others who are really demanding for the use. So we're not really missing enthusiasm of localized AI. The enthusiasm is there, right? And having seen something similar as well when during my time with the Humanitarian Leadership Map, where you most times we are working in places where connectivity is just on the edge, starting up. It's always very good to know and see that the tools that really survive, that really get to be used, are the ones that really work offline, right? Like how Kobo is as well, but also really where local teams can run them without having to call HQ at 5 o'clock on a Friday, where no one is in office, or even the time zones are really tricky. And that's what we try to really test as well, and I'll try to really apply that test. So Upanzi network is really hosted at Carnegie Mellon. We have those 5 nodes that I've really put on the map, but we really work across the continent and really try to look at what our network within these different universities really work on. So next slide, please. Within the Upanzi network, what we would call or what we say localized AI really focuses on are 3 main things. Some of them already Merit and Tina really mentioned them, so I'll just peruse through them. But definitely the first one we really think about is the language. But the second thing I'm really going to focus on is as well as the context. So we've focused a lot on trying to assess, evaluate some of the models that are out there before people actually start to adopt them. So we want to really focus on understanding how these models are performing and how we can evaluate them independently, because obviously everyone will try to say their model is the best. We've been seeing all the commercial platforms saying that our model is the best. So we try to say, okay, let's put that to the test. How can we evaluate them? And we do have spaces and ideas on how to actually do that. But also really try to understand the context that they're in, right? Because sometimes just translating a model to another language is not, the holy grail. You need to really understand like the norms, the context, whether it's in child protection, where if you're working within the humanitarian context, whether it's cash eligibility, how are you already understanding those, right? So if it's not really understanding the conversations it's really having, it can really struggle once you switch languages. And it was really good to hear that some of the work that Merit and Tina are doing when it comes to Ethiopian languages. We do have a project also we're working on, a Fidel project, where we've released some optical character recognition within the American language, and it's really available on Hugging Face if you want to check it out. It's the idea where we try to work with lots of organizations on the ground, and I think it would be a good way of improving some of the models you guys have actually put out there. And again, really speaking to that conversation of really being able to share the data that people have without actually having to go back on the ground, and as we say, it's really expensive. The second part is really about infrastructure, not necessarily the hardware itself, but with the accessibility. I know Tino and Merit have really hinted on this, that right now we're getting a lot of people talking about the different models that are out there, but when you look at the localized AI models, no one's really having the breadth and really marketing them out there. We're getting a lot of bombardment from the different, the commercial ones, right? They're taking up the space. And I think what the conversation should really be, how can we get people to actually access these localized, systems, or at least really thinking about it in the sense of we can actually localize them, because sometimes people are told from the get-go, no, it's too hard, right? Don't even bother. Just stick to the to the commercial APIs, and they've been made easy, right? Just a click of a button, and sort of people are really pushed away from the localized part, right? Which I think for me it's more of a marketing campaign we need to really think about, and that's something we within the network try to really emphasize, of why we need to talk more about how we can actually get localized AI, localized, right? Like we need to just have a conversation about that. It's not that hard, and really make it, much more accessible for people, and make it feel like they can actually do it, especially like with the local organizations that are really already feeling overwhelmed with a lot of technology that is going their way. the third part, I think, is really about ownership. Again, something already the previous speakers have mentioned of who owns the data as it's being put out there. But the bigger part that we focus a lot on is who's auditing the models, right? Everyone will say my model is the best. I've just been looking at a new model called Kimi that has really come out. Everyone's saying it's the best right now. And again, we want to go in there. So we need to really be spending a lot of time thinking about how we actually keep on having a humanitarian sector or a combined way of really auditing some of these models, because we can't do it alone. We can't, one organization can't do it alone, and even countries can't do it alone. So we need to be thinking, how do we localize that auditing process? And for us, that's what we do want to look at. So next slide. So yeah, I did mention that one of our projects are on the video of an data set. You can just go on Hugging Faces and really check that out. It's really something that we feel like everyone who's working within the Amharic language can really test it out and check it out and maybe add it to your database. But another part I wanted also to bring up is really when it comes to localized AI, is the trust. We are in a space where we're working with people who are very vulnerable, who are very, I would say, even trust is not really the first thing that pops to their mind, right? And with the inclusion of AI right now, with all the different AI deepfakes, anti-spoofing, you will find there's a big antitrust when it comes to AI already, right? So when it also comes to localized AI, we need to be training people and protecting them and being able to train them to understand how they can actually verify what is real, what is not real. And that's going to really be, I feel, for us where we need to be taking the conversation about localizing AI, because once people feel like, hey, oh no, this is no set up on a server I don't trust, on a system I don't trust, or they really get that kind of one shot process that you may have, it may be difficult to really get them back on board. So that's something that we are really investigating. How can we help people really detect, but also know and verify what they're working with? I think for us is really, very, really key. Next slide. So yeah, so again, one of the things I want to make people really remember that when it comes to AI, or just even the word localized AI, we have seen this play out before. At least for me, I've definitely seen that. Way back when it came to maps as well, right? It used to be that commercialized maps were seen as a standard format. And over the years, it was in places where most humanitarian organizations were working in, these maps were not that much usable. There was less data in that. But obviously, as the years came by with newly, or like platforms like OpenStreetMap really came up, we saw where people pulled resources together, communities came together, communities were trained on how to standardize, how to use, how to verify, how to audit some of these places. That's why local mappers came up, like the way even actually Kobo is doing it with the local data collectors. Once you really give the power to the communities to really take it on and evaluate it and audit it as well together, it actually grows much faster. And I do think we need to treat AI the same way. To localize model, but also to have localized builders, testers, auditors. And I think that's where I think is going to be the key part, where we have that skill set at the local ground and keeping it moving, keeping it growing to be to a point where it's more defaulted and it's more trusted as well. So yeah, so next slide. Yeah, already some of these points have been really laid out. How do we get away from just having these pilots? I think for me, one of the first conversations, and I've mentioned this across my presentation, is having shared evaluations, right? We can't be able to only evaluate ourselves. You build a model and you evaluate yourself. We need to be able to go to a point where we are having shared evaluations, having independent testing as well is very key, because that really builds the trust, right? When you're coming to a tool to be used by people who are actually in a situation that you basically have one shot with them. You need to be able to get to a point where they can trust the tool and keep using the tool. And I think already this has already been mentioned, funding beyond just a demo of a couple of years. I think it takes time to adopt a tool and work with the tool and learn the tool. Definitely seen with like how Kobo, the years have gone by. It's almost 2 decades of really growing it. So we need to really go in with the mindset of localized AI won't be tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening, right? It's not going to be a year, it's not going to be 2 years. It's going to be a time that you grow with the community, with the people that are using these tools. And that obviously, I think for me, one of the conversations that I'm really passionate about is the procurement as well, right? For us to say like something is localized, whether it's AI or there's any other tool, we need to be thinking about how can we get the resources on the ground, right? If you have a procurement system that really focuses on, contracting global, platforms that make it easier for global platforms to be adopted, you definitely need to be thinking about that, right? So you need to be thinking about how can the national teams in your organization be trying to get those tools where they are. and really sharing also results across board. I think for us, one of the things we love doing is sharing results as much as we can. Let's really open source the knowledge, the information, and not only just the models, but even, the data that we've really put out there and worked with. So yeah, that's what I would say. Next slide. Yeah, I think for me, I'll end off by saying that we need to really be thinking about how we build, test, and own locally. And the auditing part that I didn't really mention there, but really independent testing is really key for us, because once you independently test a tool and really make sure that it works, you really build that trust with people. One proposal that I do have is really coming up with again, I'm just coming up with these words right now off the top of my head, is like really human authored humanitarian evaluations of some of the models we have, especially when it comes to languages, and really making them into public goods. A bit similar to the way Flores and Mastercard data sets are really put out as digital public goods. I think we need to be thinking about how we do that from the humanitarian context, especially with some of the activities we do around, cash eligibility, child protection, shelter registries, and stuff like that. But also trying to find cheap, relative ways of training people how to use the models that we're working with, because that's really going to be key, because the commercial platforms are really bombarding everyone. Like, they're making it seem like, oh, don't even try to use localized AI. And once people hear that multiple times, once you step in the room with localized AI, they will just run out of the room. So I think if we really spend a bit of time on that and do it together as a consortium, I think it will definitely be a big push for this. So thank you so much, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Deo. Again, I really love the very practical nature of your presentation, and I like the fact that you said we've run this play before, and you brought in your contextual learnings from mapping. So thank you so much for that, and thank you, Meheret and Tino, as well, for your fantastic presentations. So we now move into panel discussion. And we'll start off by, I'll ask each of you, well, you've all kind of alluded to this in your presentations, like what you advocate for very clearly, but I'd really love to, if I can put you on the spot and say, over the next 12 months, since AI is developing so quickly and everything seems to be moving so fast, like you've just said, Deo, what would you really call for? What would you really like to see to accelerate collective action in this space? So over, say, in the next year. So could I come to you first, please, Meheret? What's your take on that?
Sure, definitely, Kaman. And I think I'm going to relate to the recommendations that I already mentioned at the end of my presentation. And I really believe in, like, not only me, but as NetHope, we really believe in collective action. And for the next 12 months, what I really believe is that, especially the isolation part of recommendation that I already mentioned at the recommendation part. So everything that we build should not be isolated and only used in one organization. So what I really recommend is to go to spaces where there are in such kind of networks, not only we can list different networks like the NetHope Connected Community, the START Network, the Civicus, and other networks. So what I really believe is that to build collectively and share what we are learning, and also what's working and what's not working with a community. So I really would like to say that that is something that we should be built on the next 12 months.
I wholeheartedly agree. So, Esther, could I bring you in as well? Do you have anything to add from the NetHope perspective?
Yeah, I guess to say, in the NetHope community, for a long time, we've had a lot of, we've always had demand for people to be really sharing kind of practical examples. I suppose it's that kind of beyond the hype vibe, isn't it? But there's always, that feeling that there's a lot going on in the AI space, but people are always really wanting to see, like, what are the very tangible examples of what different organizations are doing. So I think continuing to be able to kind of document and share those across organizations is one really important thing. And I think the other thing is that there's so much work going on in the sector now around kind of standards and frameworks and the kind of ethics surrounding AI. And obviously that's something that we have to take way more seriously than the rest of the world, other sectors potentially, because we're working with the most vulnerable people. So making sure that we really are kind of collectively working on that effort and pooling the resources that we have in order to make sure that we get in place what we need, because we're always going to be playing catch up to some extent on that. So doubling down on that effort, I think.
I could not agree more with that as well. Thank you, Esther. So Tino, what's your take on this? What would you advocate for? What do you call for to accelerate action in this space?
Yeah, it's really about the collection of training data for the many, many languages that are not well represented, and in some cases not represented at all in AI models, commercial or open weights. So we talked about some of them in the slides, and you heard from other speakers that there's a lot of initiatives around this, but the speed with which that is moving forward has barely improved over the last years. We're grateful for organizations that fund this and their initiatives, but everyone involved in this is basically competing over a very small pie. There are hundreds and hundreds of hours collectively being spent in writing grant proposals, and eventually someone gets 100,000 to do a work that takes 12, 18 months to conduct, and eventually you have to justify that it was actually useful to the donor, and maybe you could do a follow-up grant and collect data for another language or two. The scale, this will take us hundreds of years if we continue doing this. This is not in the world of AI. We are collecting this kind of data in a 19th century mindset. This is just insane. Given the fact that we can build applications, we can verify and improve software, and yes, ethically, we can do all this faster these days. But all of that is based on the models being, what they are, based on the training data that was available, and that's mostly a lot of English, a lot of European languages, very little and incomplete, insufficient data, especially for transcription for many, many of the world's 7,000 plus languages. So my big ask is, and we speak to donors about this regularly, is to create a pool fund. This is not something that can be done in the current way of doing things, and the gap will never close. And it'll actually we're burning 20, 30% of funding just to compete over these grants, like I mentioned. That is not scalable. At the end of the day, because everyone has the mindset, as we just talked about, Merit said it very wisely, this needs to be all open source, everything open license. So yes, everyone can use that training data to improve their own models, but humanity will benefit from it, but not if we continue to fund it in the old way of doing things that is highly out of date.
Thank you, Tino. You shared some very sobering stats and facts on the current state of play. So very clear call to action there. Thank you very much. So Deo, what's your take on it? What would you like to see over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be very similar to the previous speaker. I think, Carmen, we talked about this a few days ago. We had a visit from like some of our funders from the Gates Foundation and Microsoft, and even they were saying that AI is actually expensive. And we got a report from Bill himself saying that his team is complaining that they're also running out of tokens, and they need more GPUs and CPUs and everything, and he was shocked, right? Like, so we're definitely in a space where we are playing with a technology that is very expensive, and I do think it has to come to a point where we have to be thinking about how we share the resources we do have, and especially in the humanitarian sector where the resources that could be are more limited now than ever as well. So we need to be thinking, how do we have shared resources, and how do we actually use them more effectively? Like Tino has mentioned, we can't be competing in a space that needs actually people to be working together. So I think for me, one of the things I want to be seeing is more collaboration, especially like Tino has mentioned in the training data sets, and on my side as well, really in the evaluation as well, right? Because everyone is just, we're having so many models coming out and everyone's saying mine is the best, but we're not evaluating them really critically before we actually deploy them with the people. And what we're getting is just bombarding a lot of our beneficiary people with so much technology, so much models, and we're getting confused, right? Like everyone is going for the best for anything that is coming out, and I think it's getting to a point where it's more confusing now than ever. Other than actually trying to improve the technology itself, it's more of just I put on something. I think someone told me the statement of we are glossing over some of our problems, right? Where we're putting lipstick on a few things and then we put out another model, as opposed to actually actively trying to improve it and putting out something really that is better. So I think for me, the next 4 months, I would hope we see less pilots, more longer deployments, much more strategic, improvement of models, and really working together as well to really make this happen, especially when it comes to language, context, culture norms, and really embedding that within the models we're working with. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Thank you so much, Deo. Hearing all of you speak, I actually find it really inspiring because sometimes when you're in this space, it can feel quite overwhelming because of the pace, because of the conversations and the discourse and everything that's happening in the commercial space. Sometimes you wonder how much traction we can gain with localized approaches and like how do we make that viable. But because all of you have set out very sort of clear and articulated ideas, your experiences going back pre-AI, I think I feel quite more optimistic after hearing your presentations, and I'm sure our people on the call will too. So thank you very much for sharing that. So I'll now move to some audience questions. So thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions through the Q&A. And I'm going to put a few individual questions and then some group questions. So I'm going to start off with a question for Esther from Orin, who asks if we have any advice for drafting policy or guidance documentation for organizations, because they say that this is lacking right now and it is difficult to find examples. So what do you think, Esther?
Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, I was delighted to see this question and I asked to answer it because NetHope does develop a lot of different resources to support organizations to put in place policies and governance frameworks and things for AI. So I'll share a link in the chat to some of the ones that we have available now publicly on our website. We're also developing currently a policy template as well to support smaller organizations. So always kind of keep a lookout on our resource page for new things that are coming up. We have lots of new kind of reports and resources coming up all the time. But I'll share that page with you anyway so that you can see what's there and hopefully that will provide some support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. So I'll now come to a question from Munia, which I'm going to put to Meheret. It's following your presentation, those fantastic, when you set out those layers of localization. So Munia asks, how can local actors in South Asia or any context gain real ownership and decision-making power and not only provide data or access? Do you have any thoughts on that, please, Meheret?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And something I feel like to mention first is that it's the same thing, like this question specifically mentioned the Southeast Asia, but it's also the same thing that we talk in different regions in the NetHope connected community. So they mentioned that how for the layers that I mentioned work for every localized AI solution. So not specifically to that continent, but in order to that this localized AI tools to be owned and governed by the people that they are using, all the layers apply to them, to starting from the language to the ownership stage. So when we talk about the smaller layers that I already mentioned, the access, the language, if the tool is available in their own language, if they have access into their own infrastructure, not the one that we assumed, if they are the one who is providing the governance tools and also writing the governance that is contextual to their community, I believe that is how we are going to develop and reach at the ownership stage of the layer, so that that is owned and governed by the community that they are using. So that is how I see it when all the layers are implemented. When we apply localized AI, that is where I call it, the tool is really localized and we can call it localized AI.
Thank you so much, Meheret. So next, I'd like to come to a question for Deo from Mo. It's around your presentation. Mo asks, what are the challenges in your work on, sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, FIDEL, FIDEL, Amharic OCR, bit of a techie one, but have you got anything to chip in on that one?
Yeah, no, one of the challenges actually is getting enough data. I think that was the first part. To be able to generate this, we worked with over 2,000 people generating some of the, and they had to do like handwritten, questions and everything, and that wasn't even yet enough, right? That was we felt like it was even still small. So the first thing we're definitely struggling is with just getting enough data. We need enough people to actually, sit down and write some of these things out and get that character, recognized as well. The second part as well is we need to do a lot more training as well. We need a lot more CPUs, a lot more people to really work on the training of the data set as well, and that is still going on actually as I speak, to really keep improving the accuracy, because it's only a one snapshot of like, you collect once, you move on, and everything is click and done. So we have to go back and forth on that. Right now we are working on improving the accuracy and the models as well, and really trying to get the data working with the right models. That has also been a challenge as well. Some of the models say they are good. Once you start working with them, you find out, oh, actually they're not good. So it's almost like we're going hit and misses on different ones. So we have to go like, whack-a-mole sometimes, right? But the exercise itself really helped us find out which ones are really saying what they're saying. So that's some of the challenges we've been having with creating these data sets. You need to understand, one, creating the data is very expensive, so you have to really spend a lot of time collecting that. Two, the models themselves really say one thing. Once you start working with them, you find that you actually have to keep shopping and changing them out over time. So yeah, that's some of the challenges we've been facing with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deo. So I've got a question that I'd like to put to Tino. How can we ensure that locally designed humanitarian AI also addresses specialist functions such as finance, donor compliance, and audit requirements, where a contextually incorrect recommendation could directly affect program delivery and accountability? Do you have any thoughts to share on that one, please, Tino?
That is so specific. I love it. I think I forgot to say that earlier. Esther, thank you so much for bringing the definitions up. I think this is so rare that these kinds of discussions are preempted and framed with proper definitions. And then we spend 2 hours talking about localization, and at the end you realize no one agreed on what it actually means. So using that definition to answer the question, I think the challenge you describe is it could be one of localization, absolutely, because if the training data is inherently using up-to-date, financial reporting data for your organization, your country, then that's great. Although this is where even the best models, even for European, US questions, are starting to struggle because they were trained on everything, and that could be out of date by the time they stop training, and it was incomplete and conflicting. So nothing replaces proper sharing with these models of absolutely up-to-date, correct, authoritative data. So anyone relying on these models to say, how do I do X? How do I report my taxes or whatever, is going on an extremely slippery slope, even in the best circumstances. So localization, I would argue, should not play the role of filling these gaps. I think it's certainly it can help with these things so that the model is not completely unaware and does not completely just hallucinate these topics, but it is so specific, and you're always going to be liable to was our training up to date? By definition, it's never going to be up to date. So at the end of the day, I would say the onus is unfortunately on the user to say, here are the correct guidelines for financial reporting. Upload those as part of the context in the prompt. Then ask the question to the model that you're trying to do. Help me fill this in. How should I report this? Is it this page or that page? Should I say option A or option B? But I would say that's not, in my understanding, maybe the other speakers disagree, the job of localization is to bring that up to speed for every country and continue to be current, which is such an impossible task at the same time.
Thank you, Tino. So next, I'm going to ask a question that I'll put to the group for anyone to jump in and share any thoughts. So this is a question from Saeed around security, who says that this notion of security and challenges has been at the core vis-a-vis humanitarian data. So Saeed's question is around trust in using AI, especially when local organizations, but even INGOs as well, don't have resources. Would anyone like to share any thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, sure. I can take a crack at it. So one of the things actually we do within the lab here is like most of the work that we do, cybersecurity really comes key, right? So we need to first of all look at how data is actually moving and how that affects the users as well. But I must say for me, as an organization looking to take on localized AI or just AI in general, I think security needs to be the first and foremost, right? Especially now in a sector like the humanitarian sector, where you're working with people, vulnerable people who will be refugees or displaced persons. That should be really at the core that you start with, right? Whatever you're implementing needs to be thinking about that. The rule we usually tend to have is try to avoid data from always moving, right? You can always try to test more audit train models in place. Nowadays, organizations, even countries have national data protection policies. You try to follow those. Really trying to keep the standard as it is as much as possible because you don't want to break the rules you already have, right? Just because you want to get AI on board. Because in the end, what you're trying to do is trying to improve service delivery for the people that you're working with, right? You're trying to really make the lives better for them. So if you feel like you can't implement, at least for me, that's where we look at it as well. If you do feel like the where you're working in, you can't fully implement AI without compromising your security, especially data security for the people that you're working with, we always tell people that, hey, don't take the risk, right? Try to do lots of we work with a lot of, at least when we're doing our tests and our audits and everything, we try to work with a lot of synthetic data and do lots of testing and demos before we actually try to say, okay, let's go live, let's deploy. You would rather spend months and years and let everyone go forward and get the shiny things and go to the moon with some of the AI tools that they have. Because there is the fear now of FOMO, right? Missing out, right? Everyone's saying, oh, I have the new mode, I have the new tool, right? So you fear that you're missing out. I don't think that should be the case, right? You should be saying, hey, we rather have, the oldest model ever, but it actually works for us. Or we could have, the mid-size model. You don't have to be at the top of the game to really be able to really improve the work you're doing. That's the notion we go with. So start off small, I would say. Start off with what you can buy, because right now, like you mentioned, resources are a little, may not have enough, but you start off where you can actually be able to control and secure what you have, and then keep growing, because you don't have to go full blast. Okay, we're at the top, we're the best, we are competing with everyone, or something like that. So at least that's what I would say we should go with when it comes to security.
Thank you so much, Deo. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Okay, I'll move to the next question. So this is a question around tools from Ishaku. They're asking what the HLA recommends, but as a sort of neutral convener in this space, we don't recommend specific tools, but we're obviously really keen to learn about the ecosystem and what is fit for purpose for different humanitarian contexts. So I'll put this to anyone else on the panel to ask, how would you, just like how Deo was just talking that through, the decision-making process, how would you go about thinking through the tools that you're using in alignment with localization in humanitarian programming?
Maybe I can say something, and if there's anything to add, please feel free to add. So when I see this question, how I see it is, I don't think there is one single recommended tool that we are going to say use this, because I believe that the whole argument is that the right tool depends on our context and on our use cases. So maybe you have seen it in the chat. I have shared that some of our latest briefing that is written on local AI, which works offline in our machines that doesn't go online, our data doesn't go out. So if we have that kind of context and if we want that kind of thing, this local AI approach might be something to explore. But as I mentioned, related to the use cases also, for example, if we're exploring data collection tools, it might be Kobo already mentioned, Tino already mentioned it. So like based on our use cases for data collection, we might say Kobo. For other things, we might say other tools. So based on our context and based on the use cases, I believe there are a variety of tools that we are going to adopt for the work, for the humanitarian work we are implementing. So yeah, that's what I would like to address it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meheret. I see a lot of appreciation for your response, as well as everybody else's contributions throughout this webinar, which I can't believe it's almost time to draw to a close. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer more. I mean, I would love to have a 3-hour webinar, but I don't think everybody else would be up for that. But so thank you very much to everyone. What we'll do is we'll collate all of the chat, all of the questions, we'll go through that, and if there's a way that we can incorporate that and respond to it in different formats, we'll look into how we may do that. So after the January webinar, Esther and I worked on a guide which we produced as a follow-up. So we'll see if we can produce some form of resource as an outcome from this session. So thank you so much to everyone for your fantastic engagement, and of course our incredible speakers for sharing your insights, which I honestly found very, very reassuring and inspiring as well. So thank you so much. So I'm just going to spend the closing minutes to wrap up together with Esther. Thank you to our wonderful audience for taking the time to be here and really engaging in this conversation. When the browser window closes, a short Zoom survey will pop up. So if you can answer those, I'd really be grateful for your feedback. This recording will be uploaded to the HLA YouTube channel, and you'll receive an email with that and all of the links. I know that everyone's really keen to get the slides so we could go through the info in more detail. We'll share that in a PDF format. And you'll also receive an HPAS digital badge for your engagement in this session today. And you can share that on LinkedIn, tell the community and your networks what you thought, what you learned. We'd really love to see that. And then, as I say, we'll compile some resources if we can to build on the existing resources that we have out there, including some examples. You'll notice these two wonderful guests have been on our podcast in October last year. So do listen to those. They're really insightful conversations. And then in terms of upcoming events, well, there is one massive event in the calendar, which I hope everyone will be able to join in person or online. And I'll hand over to Esther to say a few words on that.
Hello. Yes, I love an opportunity to talk about our NetHope Global Summit. That's coming up again in October. There's 4 days of the summit happening in Amsterdam. But what I really want to talk about here is the virtual summit day. So that's happening on November the 3rd. And that is free for all nonprofits to attend. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of join all kinds of different sessions. I think there's about 25 different sessions happening that day. There's a whole track that's related specifically to use of digital tools in fundraising. There's stuff about cybersecurity. Of course, AI is all over it as well. So do please sign up to that. And even if you can't join all the sessions at the virtual summit, if you do sign up, you also get the recordings as well, so you can look at those afterwards. Thank you very much. And thanks so much for having us all here today as well.
Oh, thank you. I really love the HLA NetHope collaborations because we really do bring together complementary networks, and people can have these kind of candid conversations and hear insights that we don't normally hear in our day-to-day. So it's fantastic. And I think, just to echo what everyone has been saying, that's really critical for collective action in this space. So I really hope that we can build on these conversations at the virtual summits, which I hope that you will all be able to join. So the HLA will be at both the in-person and virtual summit. And my colleague James Maltby will be giving an in-person session together with AWS on using AI to connect humanitarian talent on where it's needed most. And then at the virtual summit, I will be giving a workshop together with Madigan Johnson from Data Friendly Space on moving AI, humanitarian AI, out of the shadows. So we hope you'll be able to join us for a practical workshop on encouraging a culture of open learning and communication. So that leaves me to say thank you once again to our wonderful panelists and speakers, Deo, Tino, Esther, and Meheret, and to our wonderful audience for taking the time to learn together with us today. So thank you very much and have a good rest of day.